Alright, we are here. The final chapter of Dio Brando the Invader, that is. It's been less than a week. We're already at the end of the first arc. Oh boy. Alright, so it starts. Jonathan's still wailing on Dio. Dio's like, How? Why is this possible? Jonathan's still pissed. You get that the best shot of Jonathan just hurtling a punch towards Dio. He looks man, he's really getting into it. His legs off the floor. Yeah, he is pissed off. And he hits Dio, and like a very specific line of blood from Dio's cheek goes in like a specific direction, and it touches the stone mask. Dio's fell on his ass. The stone mask rumbles, and then the spikes come out. It activates. It falls off the wall. Jonathan notices it. He looks back at it, and there's this weird panel of like his face, but like there's no other features. It just looks like his whole head is just a blank white rectangle. Kind of looks weird. But yeah, and then Dio is really pissed. He's clawing at the carpet, and he's like, "How dare you do that to me?" And he's crying. And Jonathan's taken aback. He probably wasn't expecting Dio to actually cry, even though he's like, "I'm gonna punch you till you cry, Dio." And then Dio, he pulls out a knife. He hides it behind his back. He goes towards Jonathan, and that's when George notices something's going on. He's like, "What are you two doing?" The stone mask, the spikes go back. It goes back to normal. And then Dio tries to hide the knife. But I'm kind of confused at what his exact body motion is, because we look in that first panel, he's holding the knife with his right hand behind his back. He's putting it away with his right hand in this other panel, but it's swiping down as if he had it like in front of him. When normally all he would have to do is like just pivot his arm down and then stealthily put it back in his pocket. Very similar to how I imagine he would have pulled it out. But yeah, George has some drip. Let's talk about that for a second. He's got a turtleneck. It's like some sort of leather overjacket thing. Yeah, it looks pretty alright. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, it's expected for boys to fight. But JoJo, you were just wailing on him and not even giving him a chance to catch his breath. That is not gentlemanly." And like, how much did he see? Because like it's been in real time. It was probably like 10 seconds after Jonathan stopped wailing that George took notice. I don't know. And he's like, "No excuses. Head to your room. I will punish both of you." And then the two look really pissed at each other, Jonathan and Dio. Dio looks more pissed, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, they both look really good. I like the shading on them. Dio's shading looks pretty good. And then yeah, Jonathan walks away. There's this weird panel with the door open. There's wind, but like Dio's face is like almost completely darkened out by the shading. It looks kind of off. A few days later, we see Rocky's attempt at a rainbow. It looks kind of cool. I like how there's like a different design to help differentiate the shades. But anyways, we got one of the butlers. He's taking trash to the incinerator. He opens it up, puts it in, then he notices there's a box. And he's like, "Huh, I wonder what's in that box. Oh well, it's probably just something the maid threw out." And then he lights it on fire and he hears banging. And he's like, "Oh no, someone's trapped in there." And we get a manga-only scene. This isn't shown in the anime because kind of grotesque. I also won't show it. But it actually shows Danny leaping out of the furnace on fire with his mouth wired shut. You can see the fire's burning the wires, and he's barking again. And it's just, yeah, I can see why they didn't include that in the anime. It's very cruel. But, yeah, we cut back to Jonathan. It says it's been a few days since the whole incident, but it looks like he's wearing the same exact ensemble. Which, he has to have, like, at least, like, 20-ish outfits or so. Maybe even, like, an outfit for every day of the month. And he's wearing this one again. It's kind of boring. But anyways, there's a crow, and he's like, that crow's calling right at me. And then he like, bends over downwards, and he like throws a rock at it through his legs, and he says, throw a stone at him from between your legs. That's how you break the crow's curse. And it's like, okay. This too is manga only. I can see why. It's kind of pointless. I guess it shows the superstitions of the era. But yeah, Arita walks by. She has drip again. The panel I'm showing you, it's we see it. She's like upside down, so I flipped it for you. But yeah, I'm gonna do the same because I'm looking at it, and she's got a cute little dress on. I imagine those stripes going down would probably be like red or something. I don't know. That reads to red. As red to me. Like, she's got that. She got these, little triangle-looking frills by her collar. Yeah, looks pretty cool. And then, yeah, Jonathan's like, oh, Arita! And then he hides because he doesn't want her to see him. And she's just walking by real sad. I also want to point out, Jonathan's hair in this panel looks kind of cool. I know that's kind of a nothing statement, but I don't know. I mean, Jonathan's hair so far has kind of been whatever, but it looks kind of cool in this one. And then he thinks to himself, I can't think of what to say to her. She must feel the same way. It's as if I'm trapped behind a wall of glass, unable to convey my feelings. Then he punches the tree. I don't know if he waited long enough for Arita to be out of earshot, but he punches the tree and yells, damn it! Dio, if this was your goal, you accomplished it! Then he runs off, and he's like, I've never felt this depressed before. All this misery, pain, and loneliness. And it shows this panel of him walking through the street, and there's this one person who's kind of looking at him. I don't know, the way this is drawn, it makes me think that Jonathan was like about to walk headlong into this person, and the person notices and they jump out of the way, and they're kind of just looking at this downtrodden youth. But yeah, Jonathan returns to the mansion, and yeah, it looks like George and the butler were waiting to apologize to Jonathan, and then we see not Dio's grave. I wish, right? Danny's grave. And they're all looking at it. Jonathan is in shock. And George is like, it was terrible, so we had him buried before you got here. The police said a burglar probably wanted to get rid of him before we robbed the house. It's kind of a fucked up way to do it, but we really should tighten security up around here. And then the butler who lit the fire that burned Danny is like, Master, are you alright? You know, he's just checking in with Jonathan about his feelings, something his father should be doing right now. But all Jonathan says in response is, Dio. And then the butler mentions that Dio hasn't come back from school yet. And then we see a really sad page. The anime kind of glosses over this a little. It shows the same basic sentiment, but it shows Danny's empty doghouse and bowl. there's some narration that says JoJo went up to his room and slept for 2 hours. And after he woke up, he lay there for a bit and remembered that Nanny was dead and cried. I don't know, that's like a really sad page. And it's kind of a really realistic one too. Cause like, I don't know, I've been there when something bad happens to me, then I'll go to bed and then I'll wake up and then it takes me a minute and then I remember and then I'm sad again. Yeah, poor Jonathan. And then it cuts to Dio. He's wearing something cool. I don't really know how to describe it. He's got like a tan jacket, some cool looking 19th century old timey collar thing. It's like he's got a sweater vest underneath the jacket. Then he's thinking to himself, oh man, I didn't know JoJo could explode like that. I really underestimated him. It's like the harder you hit him, the stronger he gets. I may have taken care of his butt, but I really need to control my temper. And then the narration says 7 years have now passed. That the stone mask waits in the silence of time. And that's the chapter, that's the arc. That's the first episode of the anime. It took us almost a week to get through it, and here we are. So, I want to pose a question to you, and I want you to think about it. Is Dio Brando, the Invader, a good introductory arc to the entire JoJo series as a whole? And I don't want you to blurt out the answer. I feel like if you're like me, it'll be an instant yes, but don't blurt it out. Just think about it for a moment. You know, we've been reading this arc bit by bit throughout the past few days. So I want you to think, is this arc a good introduction to the JoJo series? And I'll give you a minute. So, here's my thoughts. My short answer to that would be yes, it is a good introduction to the JoJo series as a whole. And I'm going to go back to Chapter 1 real quick. And like I was saying at the end of Chapter 1, that chapter was a pretty good introduction to the story. It gave you a good feel of who the good guy was, who the bad guy was, what motivates them. And, yeah, after that, we see Dio being a major dick. And the way I see it, like, the way I initially experienced it, it kind of did feel, well, bizarre to me. That Dio is just has so much bravado in being a dick to this one guy. And it's like, bruh, like I get you're hungry for wealth, but like you kind of already swimming in it, dude. Like what more could you want? Like I'm sure George would have given him something in death. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he still would have given like the estate to Jonathan, but he probably would have given Dio something. Like we don't really see much of how George sees Danny in this first arc. Or I keep fucking up the names. George sees Dio. We don't see much of that in this arc, but from what we can tell, he's all right with Dio. He admires his ability to get questions right, at least. And you know, this arc doesn't have like anything supernatural. It doesn't have stance, doesn't even have hormone. But it does have Dio being a massive dick. And I think that's probably the most supernatural thing of all. Really. And a lot of JoJo, a lot of the conflicts are a lot of good versus evil. Especially later on, the morality kind of gets grayed out a bit. Like, especially in the second continuity, that happens. But you can pretty much argue that every part is a battle of good and evil. And this is probably the most pure form of that, because, like, Jonathan is pretty much all good. Dio is pretty much all bad. And they clash, like, I don't know, like you can... Let's take part 6, for example. I won't go into spoilers, because, like, the anime just came out, but we have Jolene, who's kind of a baddie. She kind of breaks the law, has a history of doing that. And you have Poochie, who is like, he's a priest. He out of all the main villains, he is probably the most morally good, even though that isn't really saying much. And I won't really get into what exactly he was trying to accomplish, but he did have, like, the general well-being of everyone in mind. Now, that doesn't make what he was doing good. Doesn't mean he's a good guy. But the water's kind of got muddied there. And I feel like if you're gonna have a later part muddy the waters a bit, you really need to have an earlier part show what this good versus evil conflict is in its most pure form. Which I would say, now that being said, Jonathan's characterization during this first arc is kind of interesting. I'll say interesting. So, we have that scene in the first chapter where he tries to beat up the bullies who are messing with Arena. He gets beat up, and that really shows a good bit of his character right there. But after that, it kind of just seems like he's a regular kid. Like, there's that one scene where he hears the boys talking shit about him, and his first impulse is to just punch one of them in the face. Like, does that scream good boy Jonathan to you? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he is just a kid. I mean, if it was me, I don't know if I would have gone as far as to punch someone in the face, but I definitely would have made a big stink about it. Yeah, there's that one small scene where he mentions to Arena he would tie a frog around its legs and swing it around. That seemed kind of mean, too. And I noticed when these two were fighting just in the past 2 chapters, it felt like I wanted Dio to lose more than I wanted Jonathan to win. Because Dio is a fucking bastard. He's a fucking prick ass, blonde ass douchebag. And he deserves to get the shit kicked out of him. And Jonathan did that. And I'm very glad that Jonathan did that. But, like, I feel like we weren't really made to sympathize with Jonathan too well. Like, I mean, I can kind of feel bad for him. He's having a lot of his life kind of upended by Dio. But at the same time, we don't really see a lot of him as a person. We kind of just see him, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a gentleman. I'm gonna fight because it's right. And that's cool and all. That's kind of all we really get of him character-wise. Dio, on the other hand, he's just an over-the-top dick. He's fucking ego complex, God complex even. He's a very knowledgeable person. He can read people really well. Like, he knew pretty much instantly that Jonathan was a good boy, even though we didn't really get the best look at that. And he's like, oh yeah, this guy will be a piece of cake. I'll fucking ruin his life, and there's not a thing he can do about it, even though, well, there was a thing he could do about it. But, like, yeah, Dio's pretty good at reading people. He's good at, I'd say he's good at being able to reel it in, but there's a couple instances, one with Arena, one with Jonathan, where he's like, oh man, I need to control my temper. But, like, around George, he's shown as being really well behaved. And, it definitely shows that he at least knows how to control his emotions. Like, he sometimes he'll kind of fudge it, but it's not a foreign skill to him. But anyways, back to my original question. I asked that because, and I especially noticed this when I first got into this series, that a lot of people will say that part 1 isn't the best introduction to this series. That it's slow, it's boring, all these things, and they'll suggest starting at part 2 or part 3, or hell, even like part 5 or some shit. But I feel like we do get a sense of Araki's bizarre style of storytelling from this arc. And that it really shows to me that it doesn't really need to rely on, like, supernatural stuff like Hamon or Stans to tell a compelling story. Like, sure, maybe there is a lot of action in this arc. Maybe there's a good bit of exposition, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like you definitely need to have exposition for this, especially since, like, all of the original continuity parts tie back to Dio in some way, and this is the part where we're formally introduced to Dio, and we kind of get to know him and know what he's all about, and that he's a fucking dick, and we know why we shouldn't hate him. But yeah, I think this is a good introduction to the series, because it shows the good and evil stuff. It shows Araki's style of storytelling. And yeah, and part 1 isn't really even that long. It's 9 anime episodes. It's like 3 hours of real time, of real watching. That's not, compared to everything else, it's like a puddle. But yeah, that's the arc. It's a good arc. Thoughts on the chapter itself, chapter 5. It was alright. It kind of concluded this little arc and set the stage for what's to come, I guess. Kind of shows the resolution of this arc, because, like, we started kind of right at the climax, or I guess maybe even right after the climax, right as the tension's starting to descend. But yeah, I liked it. I like this arc. We see the bad guy. Well, I mean, he doesn't exactly lose, but he doesn't exactly win either, and that's, for right now, that's good enough. And yeah, they're gonna be adults tomorrow. So yeah, they got like 7 years of growing to do in one day. That's insane.